Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be reviewing the latest Sasuke tournament, Sasuke 38. And I do apologize for this video being so late, but I mean, that's kind of the way it has to be based around my schedule and when the season aired. But yeah, let's talk about the season, which for the most part, I enjoyed. I mean, Sasuke 38 does have some massive pros going for it, from having a pretty strong field of competitors and notable names that were fun to see back. Stage 2 finally made an impact again after so many years of Stage 2 essentially just being this joke. We got to see the rolling log and cliffhanger dimension, which were obstacles that weren't utilized in the last tournament due to some weather issues, and we actually saw them make a pretty big impact on the season. And also, we ended it with the Kanzenteha. This is a solid tournament as a whole, but I do have minor complaints here and there about it that do knock it down, and most of those stem from what happens in Stage 1 and how it's presented. So that being said, I mean, let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about Stage 1, which for the most part played out exactly as I was expecting. And to be honest, that's kind of how this season as a whole played out. That's not to say that there weren't fun moments here and there. I mean, I will say that I do think this stage ran a bit long. Out of the 4-hour show, Stage 1 pretty much took up the first 2.5 hours. And now there's a couple reasons why. I mean, first off, we get one modification to the stage in the inclusion of the silk slider, which is really strange that they're taking an obstacle from A&W and literally just bringing it to Sasuke, which, I mean, you could say they did that with the dragon glider and with the wing slider, but I felt like it was never this obvious, where they literally kept the same name and everything. But also, it's just kind of a mediocre obstacle. I mean, on A&W, it did cause a lot of damage, largely because of the landing platform being very difficult to stick to. But here, with the landing platform that they gave you, I mean, this was a very, very easy obstacle. And because it was so easy, it meant more people made it to the fishbone and the dragon glider, people who probably shouldn't have made it that far. And because of that, it felt like they obviously spent more time on the show showing those runs of people making it further into the stage, which extended the amount of time that this stage was shown on TV. Another thing that did kind of annoy me with this stage is its focus on the celebrities. Now, obviously, every season has its group of comedians and singers and actors and those sort of people that do get shown on the show. But I felt like here, I really noticed that it was a bulk of the show. It really felt like over half of the entire runtime of Stage 1 was spent with focusing around celebrities or comedians. And that dragged it out even more, where obviously now we're getting their shtick, we're getting their intros, we're getting interviews with them. Like, it takes up a good chunk of Stage 1, and that really did harm the pacing for me personally. Now, as for the course, I mean, I mentioned the silk slider being kind of lame, but I do think it could have been okay if it was the first obstacle instead. I mean, I'm personally pretty bored of the quad step rolling hill combo, especially considering it is also the slowest obstacle on the stage. I do really like the rest of the stage though. Again, fishbone is still interesting to watch. Dragon gliders, easily the toughest obstacle here, probably too much so, but I love the obstacle so much that I don't really care how unbalanced it is. And then I still like the tackle and warp wall combo as the final obstacles of the course, as again, it adds a lot of tension to the warp wall attempts, as it gives us some surprising fails and also some surprising clears at points. As for the results, I mean, we start off the tournament with number 2. I mean, they didn't even bother showing number 1, but we did get to see the return of Torisawa, and he fails the first obstacle, just like normal. We then get shown a run that makes it to the dragon glider, we get a digest, we get Karen, who's back again for some reason, or I mean, really for obvious reasons, but she fails very early, and that's when we get to the intro to the show, which felt kind of weird. I know they've done this in the past, but still, it's really weird that, like, we literally go through, 5 or 6 people before we get to the intro. But during this intro, we did get a lot of focus around the dragon glider, and I feel like that was when it was pretty clear that, yeah, that's going to be the ninja killer of this course. We did get our first batch of comedians immediately after the intro, where we see them both make it to the dragon glider, and this leads us to the first clear of the day with Koji Saikawa, who did end up clearing last time as well, but considering he was one of the first few celebrities to run the course during this tournament, I was surprised that we got to clear this early on. We then get to number 16, Takashi Homna, who seemed to only be shown because he had like a funny fail where like he trips over the trampoline on the dragon glider. I was surprised that they skipped over Akira Omori, and really his omission from the season felt like the biggest snub in terms of the editing of the tournament, which I think in terms of showing that people needs to show, I felt like they did a relatively good job at that. We didn't get some more celebrity runs until we get to Daisuke Matsura, who is someone that has never cleared stage 1, but I mean, he's known for having a lot of obstacles to train on, and I really thought he was going to clear here. I mean, he did have a bit of a rocky start at points with like the silk slider and fishbone, but he was finally able to clear the dragon glider, and at that point, I thought he had it. I thought he was going to get the wall in the first try. He ends up missing it, so I mean, he doesn't move on, but he got pretty close this time. It was also during this run that we get this really strange ad involving Yamada and him trying to promote this app. And then we get like this shot of him like baking. And then like out of nowhere, like Yuji, Shingo, and Takeda are like talking about Yamada on this ad. Like it's so weird. Like I don't get why this was a thing. But whatever, let's move on. I mean, we got a decent amount of digests following that run, including Yusuke SASUKE, who's like the current Sasuke sensei. And he ends up running out of time right on top of the warp wall, which I mean, kind of as expected. I mean, he's a pretty inconsistent competitor. Seems to pretty much clear like every other tournament. After him, we get another clear from another celebrity, surprisingly, in Hayate Kajihara, who clears pretty easily. And immediately after him, we get the Black Tigers, who are obviously like the proteges of Katsumi Yamada. And both of them ended up making it to stage 3 last time. And they end up clearing here again, and I was actually pretty impressed by them as a whole. Considering it's funny how, like, again, the Black Tigers used to be this joke. I mean, back when Yamada started bringing people to the course, back in, like, I think it was 29, and, like, pretty much for a while, like, none of these people were taken too seriously. But it's interesting now that, like, the two Black Tigers that are competing are two of the top competitors of the entire show at this point. Then we get this really long segment, which this one really dragged out for me, that involved the Akko army, where it had this like comedian woman who brought out this group of 5 people to compete, and she was like on this dolly, and they used that so she could like provide reactions to things. And it's like, this sucked. I mean, all of her competitors really sucked. I mean, this segment took up so much screen time and really just ruined the pacing of stage 1 for me. So again, like for me, I did not particularly like that. But immediately after that segment, we do get Hyoki, who ends up clearing stage 1 pretty easily again. But then again, we follow that up with another comedian duo. This time, it's like a taller guy and a shorter guy. The taller guy fails the dragon glider, but the shorter guy had a more interesting run. I mean, he does fail earlier. He fails at the descent during the rolling hill. He had a pretty fun fall. And also, I did like how they paid homage to Akiyama with like using his themes and him dressing up like him. And that was fun, even though obviously it was all a joke. After them, we do get a few more celebrities. Probably the biggest standout of them is Wasabi, who does make it to the dragon glider and actually makes the transition. But then the bar derails like immediately after that. So that was an interesting fail there. But then we start to get some of the bigger names, though 2 of them do get fast forwarded. First one of which is sadly Nagasaki, who failed stage 1 again. This time for not letting go during the transition on the dragon glider and pretty much just timing out there. We also see Kano fail the dragon glider again, which this was really disappointing, where he actually loses his grip on the first part of it, which is, again, very underwhelming run for him. But we do eventually get to a clear from Ryo Matachi. And again, it was really nice to see him back clear stage 1. He's another competitor that's super inconsistent. Definitely had a massive dry spell after Sasuke 30. Had a good run 36, but then messed up last time. So it was nice to see him clear again here. But then after that, we're back to more celebrities. This time we have this group that's being led by Toshiaki Kasuga, who is this comedian that did compete back in like Sasuke 23 and 24. And he never did particularly well. And here he does end up failing the first obstacle also. But we did actually get a clear from this group, which was pretty surprising. In Rine Sugera, who gets to the warp wall with almost like no time left, but actually gets the wall on his first try and barely hits the buzzer in time. So that was a pretty interesting run to see. We then get a couple female competitors, with obviously the more notable one being Ayano Oshima, who's, again, this person that I was so confident she was going to clear stage 1. This is probably one of the bigger shocks for me of the entire tournament. I really thought she was set up for a clear here, especially with the woman's time limit being so ridiculously high. Like, they added 45 seconds to the standard timer, which is, again, should be way more time than she needs to clear the course. And she was on a very solid pace, but then she ends up failing at the very end of the dragon glider, which, to be honest, again, probably one of the more surprising fails of the entire tournament for me. And this was a tournament that didn't have massive surprises for me. Again, most things played out exactly as expected. I mean, yeah, you could say, oh, like, this person didn't fail exactly like I thought they were going to, but, like, I still had a general sense of where they were going to fail. Oshima's run here is probably one of the ones that, like, was the most surprising to me. But I mean, really, that's one of the bigger flaws with this season as a whole for me, is just how predictable it was. Like, I feel like so much of this tournament was what I was expecting coming into it, which isn't typically the case with Sasuke tournaments. I noticed this when I was looking back on the tournament few hours after it aired, because like usually what I would do after Sasuke tournament is go back and watch all like these big runs that had these massive surprising moments so I could see them again. It's like, I was thinking like Sasuke 38, it's like, what is there to watch? There isn't that much. So that is a massive downside for the tournament for me as a whole. After this, we did start to head towards the higher numbers on the list. We had an interesting Dragon Glider fail where someone missed at the dismount. We had Naoki Araki get fast forwarded, but he does end up clearing stage 1, which he ended up failing last time after having made it to the cliffhanger back in Sasuke 36. Then we get to our next batch of celebrities with the Rampage from Exile Tribe, which I really didn't care about. Again, this was another one of the celebrity segments that was just so boring to me, because it's like they were pretty dull. I mean, at least the comedians like try to bring some comedy to it. Like, these guys are just singers, and they're just pretty dull, and then they didn't even perform that well. I mean, 2 of them failed the Dragon Glider, 1 failed the Fishbone. It's like, none of these people really had that much potential, so found their segment pretty boring. But then after that, we get to the All-Stars. We get Shingo and Takeda, and it felt really nostalgic to me. Again, the first time in a while that we had 4 All-Stars competing in one tournament. But first up, we had Shingo go, and I actually thought at a point that, is like Shingo going to clear? Like, he actually had a somewhat decent pace getting to the Dragon Glider. I mean, he barely gets past the Fishbone, but on the Dragon Glider, I thought there was a chance, but obviously he ends up losing his grip after transition. But, I mean, at least he made the jump this time. And also, I mean, technically, he is the best performing All-Star of the season. Well, kind of, which I guess we might as well talk about. Takeda's run, which this has been a pretty controversial one, especially the ruling here. I mean, obviously, what ends up happening is on the Fishbone, he mistimed it. I mean, he did mess up. I mean, he did mess up on the Fishbone where he mistimed his run there, and then by the end of it, he almost gets knocked off, so he ends up jumping past one of the pegs and goes straight to the platform. And for that, he gets a DQ. And right when I saw that he did that, I was like, ooh, Inui's not going to like that. If you don't know, Inui is the director of Sasuke, and knowing Inui and how he's run Sasuke since he's taken over in Sasuke 28, I think it's pretty clear that he is a big stickler for the rules. He's one that really implements these rules despite them being dumb. Like, he does this with multiple obstacles. I mean, we can go back to the conveyor belt in stage 2 where people get DQ'd if they use the sides of the conveyor belt. But it's like, why don't you just block off the conveyor belt so that you can't do that? Same thing happened to, I mean, I don't know if I should be mentioning him, but Drew Dreschel in 31 with the crazy cliffhanger. He gets disqualified for turning around first before the jump. You also have like the swap salmon ladder and the rules with that. Like, I mean, Inui's always been a big stickler for these rules that I personally don't like. Again, I wish that we could keep Sasuke this thing that if the obstacle is built in a way that it allows you to approach it in a different way, you should be able to do it that way. I mean, in my opinion, like, it's production's fault that the conveyor belt has these things on the edges that allow you to progress through the obstacle without actually being on the conveyor. In my opinion, with the swap salmon ladder, like, you should be able to try it again if you don't end up failing in the water. Like, there are rules like that I do not agree with, but I knew instantly when he skipped that peg that it's like, yeah, I knew he's going to call him out for that. And it turns out, yep, Takeda gets DQ'd for skipping that peg. Again, it's dumb, but I get it. I mean, like, I get what Inui is doing. Again, he technically didn't complete the obstacle the way it was intended, but it's still like a situation where, like, I personally believe that if you can complete the obstacle, despite it not being the way it was intended, that should still count, but what are you going to do? But really, the biggest shame of all this is the fact that supposedly Takeda did actually clear the course. That supposedly they didn't stop him after the DQ because they didn't pick it up on it in time, and he ends up clearing the stage with 14 seconds left. And because of this DQ, now we don't see an all-star clear. We don't see him break the record for oldest stage 1 clear. I mean, it really sucks because it would have been a great moment, but that DQ just kind of ruined it all. After him, we do get more celebrities, but these are probably some of the more interesting ones because these are definitely the ones that have a lot more potential. We start off this group with the only one that actually clears stage 1, and that is Hikaru Iwamoto, or from this point forward, I'll just call him Snowman because that's the name of his group, and they keep on mentioning his group name. So we're going to call him Snowman. He had a solid run. Nothing really super notable, but he is one of these people that has failed stage 1 over and over and over again. It was nice to see him finally clear stage 1, though through that he gets so much airtime. Like, because he is the celebrity that performed the best, like, essentially he's like their go-to guy from this point forward for showing reactions, for interviews, and that can get a bit annoying. Plus, also, I just feel like the editing when he cleared was very heavy-handed, because, like, he starts crying, and we get a lot of this, like, celebration from all the people on the sidelines, and it just really made for this, like, kind of ridiculous TV moment where they kind of made it seem like as if he had just won the entire thing when it's like he just cleared stage 1. After that, we have the ABCZ guy, or Ryoichi Tsukada, who has been competing for a while now, but I was pretty surprised that he did fail the Dragon Glider. I mean, it's not like some mind-blowing shocker, but I did actually expect him to clear stage 1, especially with how well the celebrities have been doing this tournament. We do fast forward through Hikaru Yamamoto's run, who does end up clearing. And I know some people are upset that, again, they keep on skipping these clears. Why are they doing that? It's like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. And from what we've seen, I mean, like Yamamoto's run and later Tada is a big example of this, where both of their runs get skipped here. It's like, I'm sure they were pretty generic runs without much to really see there. Like, I don't personally need to see the same type of run over and over and over again, especially now that we're in the age where all these runs are available online after the tournament anyway. So it's like, who cares if it makes the final edited show or not? I mean, it's really not that important to me. After this, we do get a rugby player who had a really rocky run, but it was interesting to see where he does almost clear. Like, he probably would have cleared if he had gotten the wall on the first try, so that was pretty interesting. But then we get to the final celebrity of the tournament, and probably the biggest name of them all, and that is Kenji Darvish, and he had a really rocky run. I mean, he almost ends up failing on the fishbone. And then I was personally surprised to see him fail the Dragon Glider again. Again, like, this seemed to be a pretty good season for celebrities, so really surprising to see the biggest one of them all end up failing the first stage here. But through Kenji failing here, essentially this puts all of the content to Snowman instead of Kenji, so that was something. We then do get to see Jun Sato's run, which seems like that rarely happens ever, but once we were being shown his run, I was like, okay, yeah, he's definitely going to get the fastest time, right? And yep, he clears with over 30 seconds left on the clock, which is kind of ridiculous, but it was a really fun run to watch. And I did find it interesting how it was edited, because the editing here was actually very similar to how like a foreigner would be edited on the show, where we get these shots of people on the sidelines being like mind blown at how fast he's going, which is kind of similar to how a Drew or a Jesse would be edited, or even a Ragivaru in like 31, like how he was edited when he came out of nowhere. Like, this is a very similar style editing here, but it's like really strange because it's for Jun Sato, who is this guy that's been competing for like 10 tournaments now for a while now. He's like cleared stage 1. I believe this is his 10th consecutive time, which is a record. But again, at the end of the day, still really fun run here. Then we get the Tada fast forward, as I mentioned before, which, I'm personally fine with. I don't think Tada is the most interesting competitor in the world, with the exception of him being the one that made the furthest last tournament. Like, there's not really that much to really go by here, and with him having what seems to be a pretty generic clear, I'm good with not seeing his full run. But after him, we do get to Tomohiro, who failed the warp wall last time, and we do get to see footage of him training for the wall. And I remember last time I was thinking, okay, yeah, his warp wall failed. Like, that was a fluke. Like, I really didn't expect him to fail it again. I think Tomohiro's fail here is another one of the more surprising ones, but not really by the time it actually happened, because the thing that I noticed is that he's essentially doing the exact same thing he did last time. Like, last time he at least had like, oh, it was raining and all this stuff, like, to kind of put the blame on, but this time there was really nothing there. Like, he just for some reason took a lot of time immediately after the tackle and allowed himself to only have one real shot at the wall in which he misses. Like, he literally did the exact same thing this time to what he did last time. It really makes me question if Tomo really has his head in the game at this point, as, again, this should have been an easy clear for him, but he kind of just messes it up for himself. After this, we do get to the remaining All-Stars, and obviously the two main figures in terms of the advertising in Yamada and Nagano, and we started off here with Yamada, who, Yamada was one of my favorite competitors when I was younger. I remember watching like Sasuke 24 and being like heartbroken for when he failed the warp wall there, as, again, that was pretty much his last like solid attempt at stage 1, but as time has gone on, I think it's become pretty clear how much of a ham he is for the camera, and considering the stories about him being a dick in real life, My opinion of him has definitely gone down, but it was nice to see him back here. I'm considering he is 55. He did actually perform pretty well. I mean, he makes it to the Dragon Glider, and I love how it felt like he was having fun. You can definitely tell he wasn't taking it seriously anymore, and it was nice to see everyone rooting him on. So I actually did enjoy watching his run, and after him, we did get to the return of Nagano, and to be honest, I kind of have an opposite opinion of Nagano's run, where his run just didn't do much for me. I mean, it's cool to see Nagano back, but outside of that appeal, his run was very mediocre. It really felt like he was super rusty and really was just so different from the Nagano that we had seen just a few years ago in Sasuke 32. I mean, obviously he's older now, but he had trouble with like some pretty simple obstacles like Rolling Hill, Fishbone, and he ends up failing at the exact same point as Yamada. So for me, Nagano's run was pretty underwhelming. But then we get to the final two runs of Stage 1, where both Yuji and Yusuke both have solid Stage 1 runs, and I was happy to see Yuji have continued success after coming from that really rocky period of him failing Stage 1 in the early 30s, and Yusuke, I never really had any doubt that he was clearing the first stage here, and really coming into this tournament, I was fully expecting him to at least make it to the final stage, and possibly win, which obviously we will talk about. Now for Stage 2, which was the exact same course as last time, but with the rolling log as the first obstacle here, obviously because the weather didn't stop it from being so this time. But to go along with that, we did also get a slightly reduced time limit from what it was supposed to be last time, and these modifications really changed the stage for the better. I mean, the rolling log was a potential time waster on what is now a really time-sensitive course. I mean, the log can potentially get stuck, or you will be dizzy right before salmon ladder, which means you have to wait a bit for you to become undizzy. This did lead to some pretty big ramifications on how you would run this stage. The rest of the course, though, is still pretty bland to me, though. I mean, I would have excused everything had they just taken out the backstream. I mean, considering the sanitation that was needed due to COVID, you would think that they would have thought, like, you know, this is the perfect time to get rid of the backstream, but of course they had to keep it in, which to me is still probably the worst obstacle on the entire course. But let's start talking about the results themselves, again starting with Koji Saikawa, who did get past the salmon ladder this time. He did fail there last time, but did that only to fail on the spider drop, which was actually kind of nice to see someone fail there, because like I really love the concept of the spider drop, but almost no one fails there, so at least that was something. I mean, we did then also get Hayate Kajihara almost clear the course. I mean, timing out right at the buzzer, which is actually pretty impressive considering, again, he's a celebrity. This is the first time he's on the course, and this really to me came out of left field. We then get the Black Tigers, who both end up clearing, with Yoshiyuki Yamamoto getting the fastest time of the stage, while Yoshinori Issa getting most of his run cut and ends up barely clearing, which I do wish we got to see the entirety of this run, again, to see why he barely cleared, because again, this is probably the most riveting clear of the entire day, but we got to see almost none of it. But we do follow this up with Hyoki, and I think this is where it became clear to me that this stage 2 is actually a serious threat, where he has a pretty solid run up until the spider walk, but on the spider walk he does slip right at the beginning. He ends up wasting time before being able to regather himself, and by the time he gets to the wall, if he ends up running out of time, which I mean, it's never really out of the cards for Hyoki. I mean, he has timed out on stage 2 in the past, but having a competitor like Hyoki fail here from what was a relatively small amount of time loss really raised the stakes for the stage as a whole. And that was further cemented when we got Ryo next, and I was already feeling like Ryo had no shot of clearing this stage. Again, considering how sensitive the time was here, it's like Ryo is someone that's never been particularly quick on stage 2, and I think we kind of see the ramifications of that on his psyche during this run. I mean, right away we see him on the rolling log and he gets stuck for a little bit, and then he goes right into the salmon ladder, and you could just tell that he's kind of just rushing through it, but he just keeps on missing rung after rung. And to me, this is probably one of the more shocking fails of the tournament, as well as, again, to have Ryo fail the ascent on a salmon ladder, like just a standard salmon ladder, just felt really weird. I mean, again, this is the guy that's never failed any version of the cliffhanger. Like, he's completed the ultimate cliffhanger, the crazy cliffhanger, the ultra crazy cliffhanger. For this guy to also be a guy that in Sasuke 38 fails the ascent to a salmon ladder is kind of mind-blowing to me. After Ryo, we do get some more predictable runs here. We get Rine, the guy who barely clears stage 1. He fails the salmon ladder. Now Yuki Araki ends up wasting like 25 seconds on the rolling log and ends up timing out. We get Snowman, who again has been getting a large amount of focus throughout the stage, but he ends up predictably failing the salmon ladder. We do then get a slightly more shocking fail in Hikaru Iwamoto, who fails the rolling log. The only person this entire tournament to actually fail the rolling log. But then we get to some of the bigger names. I'm starting off with Jun Sato, who takes the stage relatively slow this time. And Jun Sato is someone that's obviously known for speed. I believe almost every single time he's cleared a course, he's cleared with over 10 seconds left. But again, we see him take his time here. He does wait a bit before the salmon ladder. And because of that, he wasn't really doing that great on time coming into the backstream, and I remember thinking like there's a chance he times out here, but he's still able to squeak his way through. We do then have Tada get fast forwarded again, and I don't really mind again Tada getting skipped inherently. Again, I've said this before, like I don't think Tada is the most interesting Sasuke competitor, but I do think by skipping both of his runs, it didn't leave that much suspense for me by the time we got to stage 3, as in my eyes, there's no way he was getting to the final stage having an edit like this. Anyone that makes it to the final stage is pretty prominent within at least one of stage 1 or 2. But for Tada to be pretty much skipped over for both really made it clear that he wasn't going to make it to the final there. After Tada, we do get Yuji's run, and just like Rio, I was not feeling great about him coming into the run, as he's another one that seems to struggle a lot of time during stage 2, but he actually performed better than I was expecting earlier on in the run. But by the time the backstream, he was pretty much on pace with Jun Sato, but with him just being not as great with the wall lifting as Jun Sato, I was still expecting him to fail there, and especially after he wastes a bit more time on the conveyor belt. He does end up timing out right as he hits the buzzer, which again really sucks. It really sucks that Yuji probably would have been able to make it to the final stage again if he'd been able to clear here, but I guess it just wasn't to be. But finally, we do get Morimoto, who, again, at this point, I was pretty confident Morimoto was going to win it all. I mean, that was the vibe I was getting coming into the tournament, and with Tada barely being shown, the Black Tigers not being established enough, and also Jun Sato being someone I don't have much confidence in stage 3, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion to me that Yusuke was going to end up winning it all, and we do see him just decimate stage 2, not really having much difficulty really at all. And now we move on to stage 3, which, like stage 2, is the same as last time, but due to better weather, the course is operating as expected, with the cliffhanger dimension actually working, which is a brutal obstacle that I didn't actually expect to be as difficult as it was. I mean, obviously, because we had the ultra crazy cliffhanger, which already had a moving final shelf that went up and down. And here at the cliffhanger dimension, we have the second ledge moving up and down, while the third ledge is moving back and forth. And obviously I knew that, but I think it really took me until actually watching people do it to make me realize that that's a very difficult transition to time out. Like, pretty much this obstacle becomes so reliant on your timing, where like it was before, but it was much easier to predict the timing of one object than it is to predict the timing of two objects, where two things are moving at the same time. And because of that, like, the timing needed to complete this obstacle is insane, but because of that, I also found it super interesting to watch. Now, I mean, in general, I don't love how, like, essentially the entire course comes down to this one obstacle, where this one obstacle is a lot more difficult than almost every other obstacle on the course. I mean, the vertical limit's also very difficult, but most people that can't do the vertical limit won't make it past the cliffhanger anyway. So, I mean, that's something I don't love about the obstacle, but I do like the obstacle as its own individual thing. But again, as part of the overall course, it does make it such a focal point. But let's talk about the results. And as I said, at this point, I was pretty confident in what was going to happen here. First up, we do get Yoshiyuki Yamamoto, the first of the Black Tigers. And considering how he was somewhat prominent in the edit coming up until this point, I was expecting him to actually clear the cliffhanger. I was expecting him to be a vertical limit fail, but he does actually end up failing the cliffhanger, but he does actually make both of the jumps. Actually ends up failing while trying to get to the rest platform, which again is probably the closest cliffhanger fail that we've had since David Campbell in Sasuke 27. And the fact that he failed right there was pretty shocking to me, and probably another one of the bigger shockers to me during the tournament. Still an impressive run, and something that I also noticed during his run is the fact that he would manipulate the timer. And this is something that I'm surprised more people don't do in Sasuke, because if you don't know, Stage 3 as a whole is not timed. However, you are timed on the amount of time that you can spend between obstacles. From the point that you land on the platform to the point where you have to start the next obstacle, you are given a time limit there. And I did like something that Yamamoto did here during the Planet Bridge was that at the end of the obstacle, he starts to rest his arms. And through that gives him a bit more rest than he would normally get had he just completed the obstacle right there. So that's something that I think is pretty innovative strategy for Sasuke. I can't remember someone doing this in a past tournament. So I'll be interested in seeing if more people do this later down the road. But after his run, we do get the next Black Tiger in Issa, who does end up failing on the flying bar. Again, another relatively shocking fail here where he lands crooked and then he tries to fix it. And by trying to fix it, he derails the bar. And again, pretty shocking fail, but not really someone I had much confidence in considering neither of his previous runs had been shown in full. But then we get to Jun Sato, who gets back to the cliffhanger like he always does. And sadly, he does fail it again. And really a lot of it comes down to the timing. I think he's someone at this point that could probably clear the cliffhanger, considering how much he's practiced on it. Again, I don't really have much faith for him on the vertical limit, but I do think the cliffhanger is something he can do at this point. But again, he just messed up the timing really bad to where he had to wait for a pretty long time to do the second jump, and I think that's what really cost him here. After that, we do get Tada's run, which is the first run we're being shown of him in full, and again, at that point, it's like no confidence in him clearing. And considering last time he didn't have to take on the full version of the cliffhanger dimension, I was expecting him to fail there, and he does. But with his fail, we still have 30 minutes left of the show. And with only one person left, I mean, come on. We knew what was going to happen here. So yeah, I mean, we get Morimoto, and he gets this package comparing him to Nagano. And we had been getting a lot of content throughout this tournament of him and Nagano together. And this again made it so clear to me that they were setting this up for Morimoto to win, and this essentially being like the passing of the torch from Nagano to Yusuke. And we do see, obviously, Yusuke take on stage 3 and just really blow it out of the park. Really no difficulty the entire time. Pretty standard run. I think the biggest moment there was when he cleared the cliffhanger. He had this like yell of excitement, but outside of that, pretty standard run there. And that's when we obviously reach the final, where we do actually see that it's now raining, and the announcer mentioned King Kasugi's run from Sasuke 8. But again, for me, there was really no doubt here. Morimoto was going to win. It just felt so shown here, especially again with them like trying to connect Morimoto to Nagano. It really made no sense for him not to finish here. And considering how close he was in Sasuke 36, plus also the fact that he's been training, it's like this felt like this was the time. And he does it. I mean, he blows through his spider walk, salmon ladder. He only has one real misstep there and fixes that really quickly. Gets to the rope with about 18 seconds left and ends up clearing with 2.5 seconds on the clock. I mean, this was just a really solid run on what seemed to be a near impossible final stage when we had first seen it. After the Kanzenseiha, obviously we get the celebration. They throw Morimoto and Nagano into the water. And this was a great way to end the tournament, even though it was such a predictable road. I mean, it was great to really set who is the definitive all-time great Sasuke competitor at this point. I mean, obviously, before this, I felt like Nagano had the biggest legacy. Yuji had the 2 wins. I felt like they were competing for who is the best. Like, obviously, Morimoto was the current best competitor, but I think, like, in terms of Sasuke as a whole, he wasn't quite up there just yet. But now, with him being seemingly as consistent as Nagano was in his heyday, while also having the 2 wins that Yuji has, and also still being relatively young and still having so many years of competing on Sasuke to come, I mean, I think Yusuke, for me, at this point, is the best Sasuke competitor of all time. Well, that's the entire tournament. I mean, I overall really like Sasuke 38. I think it's the perfect time for a new Kanzenseiha, and did have some interesting results here and there. We got a solid group of competitors to back it up, but the thing that really harms it for me as a TV product is the editing. I think the editing, the pacing of the season, the amount of screen time that was given to the celebrities, it just got kind of boring to me. The Yusuke win was so foreshown. I do think those things knock the season down a bit. Now, obviously not saying Yusuke's win shouldn't have happened. Like, obviously, I'm very happy that he achieved Kanzenseiha. I feel like this was a win that was very much warranted, something that should have already happened. Really, I mean, I thought 36 he was going to do it. The fact that it actually took him this long kind of surprised me, but it was really just an inevitability that Yusuke was going to win again with him being just so far ahead of the rest of the field of competitors. But while this isn't a top tier season for me personally, I still really enjoyed it. I mean, I think if I were to rank the tournaments, this would probably land somewhere in the middle of the pack. It's not a bad tournament, but just one that I have a lot of like little nitpicks here and there about. But there we go. I mean, that's my review of Sasuke 38. I really would like to do more Sasuke videos in the future, but I just don't know when I'll get around to them. I've talked about this in the past. A tournament ranking is something I really want to do. But a video that I definitely think I will do at some point before Sasuke 39 is a course prediction video where I run through the current course and talk about what I think should and will stay and what should and will go. So maybe that's a video for the future, but for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.